I absolutely love the concept of wowing the customer. And I had a funeral home that said, we need an urn in Austin tonight. And we're in Dallas. And so, I said, well, I'm going to have someone drive down there, and it's not going to be free, but we want to get it done. And so just having that approach, and especially the wow idea, I love. And I went to a big Tony Robbins event called Business Mastery.
Right.
And one of the best parts of that is to the people that you're around. And one of the attendees said, one of the biggest things you can do is write your mission statement and your values. And I think it was the Baldrige Award. And so that was one thing that I really wanted to clarify. And I love how SOAR is kind of a modified version of that, something easy to remember that really kind of hits all points where you want to look good, you want to wow the customer.
Thank you. We felt so too. We felt with our staff, we would tell them, especially when we brought on a new hire, if you only have 5 minutes to train this staff person on something, train them on SOAR. And the reason being is because if they can deliver that SOAR principle, if they can hit on all those segments, they may not know everything about our business, but if they can deliver those 4 things, they should still wow the customer in whatever role it is that they're within. So I think it's very important.
What's another important point from your book, in addition to the SOAR principle? What's another takeaway? Lessons from the dead. It's really about service. What's another element of service that a funeral home can take away and apply to their business today?
Well, we have a lot of great nuggets in there that they can take away and apply in their business right away. Some of the things that I think are very important, though, and I see this happen in every business, but I definitely see it happen in funeral service a lot of times, is some of the things you need to stay away from. And you may remember we talked about in the book what we call unintentional lies. And so an unintentional lie is when you tell that family on the phone, oh, well, Mrs. Smith, let me look into that and I'll call you back within the hour. And then the hour comes and goes and you don't call Mrs. Smith back, Well, Mrs. Smith is sitting there, maybe not technically right by the phone waiting, but you've made a commitment to that family at that point in time. And it just shows that you don't live up to your commitments by telling those unintentional lies, Or if you say, I'll get back to you by the end of the day, and then at the end of the day, hey, it's 5:30, you've had a rough day, you're on the way out the door, and you go, I forgot to call Mrs. Smith, and well, I'll call her in the morning. Well, that's an unintentional lie, and you didn't mean to tell a lie, but you did. And so you need to take that extra couple minutes, call Mrs. Smith back, give her the answer. So I always hear from funeral directors, they say, well, what if I don't know the answer? What if I haven't gotten the information I need yet? You still call Mrs. Smith back. You still live up to your commitment. That your commitment was, I'm going to call you within the hour. So you call her back and you say, hi, Mrs. Smith, this is John McQueen. I'm just getting back to you. I promised I'd call you back within the hour. Unfortunately, I haven't been able to get that answer for you yet, but I had promised I was going to call you and I wanted to live up to my promise. And then you set whatever your new benchmark is at that point in time. But those are little things that oftentimes we miss in funeral service, and it ends up taking away from the overall guest experience or customer experience.
I love that point, the unintentional lie. I try to communicate this to an employee that I have, and sometimes it can come across, like you're phrasing things a certain way so that you don't tell the lie, so that you're most likely correct. Like instead of saying I'm going to call you back today, saying I'll call you back as soon as I have that information. So phrasing things in a way that you're always coming through. But I think just being sure that you come through and staying on top of the customer service is really what's going to deliver that wow.
Sure, and I've heard that before myself. Is sort of the well, I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Well, we live in an age of speed nowadays. People no longer expect that, hey, somebody's going to get back. They want the answer and they want it yesterday. But I think if you make a commitment and you live to your commitment, that makes the customer happier, even if you don't have that answer. If you still say, hey, I'm still waiting to hear back from my supplier, or I'm still waiting to hear from the church or whomever it may happen to be, but they know you're working on it, There's another way to make it more proactive too in the funeral industry, and that is to stay in touch with the families as you make those arrangements. So in other words, what we used to do at our funeral home was, once we completed the arrangement, if say the funeral wasn't going to be for 3 or 4 days, throughout that 3 or 4 days, we purposefully called the family to stay in touch with them throughout those days, kind of update them on what was going on, and you know, that the doctors signed the death certificate, we're now doing this next step, you know, so that they knew that we were involved. Because over the years, I had heard back from many families that it seemed like, you know, we came in, we made funeral arrangements, then we don't hear from you for a week, and then you call up and say, oh, I've got mom's urn ready for you, you know? So we would like to stay in touch with that family. And it really goes back to another principle we had, Tyler, is we used to use what we called the 3-24-5. And what the 3-24-5 meant was that within the first 3 seconds of somebody coming into your business, whatever impression you make upon them in those first few moments will have a greater effect on their buying decisions than the next 30 minutes you can spend with them. The 24 hours meant that within 24 hours of having any substantive contact with a family, that you should give them a courtesy call, a follow-up, make sure if they had any other questions or concerns or things like that. And then the 5 was what mom and dad probably taught you as a kid, was, you know, within 5 days of making a sale, you should send them a handwritten thank you note. And so that's the practice we used to use at our funeral home, is, you know, again, we would greet them and smile, how our facilities looked, all of that when they walked in the door made a great impression on what we were going to do. We would then, if it was a price shopper, say, you know, if they had come in and met with us a little bit and I'd gotten enough information to know your name and number or contact information, we would follow up the next day to say, hey, Tyler, I know that you were in yesterday and we had the pleasure of talking about cremation and some options available to you. But I also realized many times when families get home, oftentimes they think of something maybe they forgot to ask. So I just wanted to follow up with you, give you a little courtesy call, see if you had any other questions. No? Okay, great. Or if they did, obviously answer them. And then if we did make a sale, whether it was pre-need or at need, then we would send out a handwritten thank you note afterwards.
Well, that's just terrific. I love that follow-up and that support of the family that lost a loved one, and really staying connected with them as soon as they make contact with you, within the first 3 seconds and on. I mean, that's really wowing the customer. And so what we're really talking about here before we started this conversation was you talked a little bit about attitudinal and behavioral loyalty. And so we're primarily talking about attitudinal, and that is building the loyalty through service.
Correct.
Can you touch a little bit on the difference between the attitudinal and behavioral?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So every company nowadays, you know, we all preach we want to have loyal customers, and those are the ones that really matter the most. And so there's been a lot of research done on customer loyalty. And what it really comes down to is it's been determined there are 2 types of loyalty. There's behavioral loyalty and attitudinal loyalty. Behavioral loyalty is your customer buys from you repeatedly, but they're maybe not really loyal, but they do it out of habit. It's just easier. They know that, you know, they can go on this website and order this particular product and they're going to get it, and it's just simple and they know how to do it. Or they know we've used this funeral home in the past, I guess we'll just call that funeral home. Or it's because there's not a lot of alternative options available to them. So they sort of become loyal, but just out of behavior. And those are the easiest customers to divert from an existing company. So if another provider comes along that offers it cheaper, easier, etc., they'll give it a try. An attitudinal loyalty customer, though, they're the ones that have that emotional bond to your brand. And those are the ones you really want. And to make those customers go from behavioral to attitudinal, takes all the additional steps, all the things we've been talking about. It's really that personal customer service side of things. And one of the ways that you do that is you do it through making memories for the family. So you have to make memorable moments for the family in order for them to build that emotional bond to your brand. And by having those memorable moments, now when another alternative comes into play, they'll say, well, yeah, you know, that one might be a little less expensive or it might be a little more convenient, but they have this emotional connection to Tyler as an example, and so they're less apt to move to that provider at that time. What they do is they weigh out the cost benefit analysis then, and they go, well, you know, hey, I've really built myself into this brand over here. We're connected to this brand. So price now does not become the main driving factor. And that's what we all want to get to.
So in funeral service, what's an example of creating a memory for a family that would really ground them with your service provider?
A couple of things. I'll give you an example, positive and negative. How's that? So the positive example would be, you know, you have this funeral for dad and you go above and beyond. So I can give you an example of one that we did. We had a gentleman that worked for GM for years, and they don't have to be expensive type ways of wowing the family, but we had a gentleman that worked for GM for years. His whole job was to design hubcaps. So there was a particular hubcap that he had designed, and so my staff wanted to wow the family, and so for the visitation we went out and we found this hubcap, one that he had designed in great shape, and got it at a junkyard somewhere or secondhand place, and they brought it back and they laser engraved it with his name and his dates on it and some little slogan, and we had it on display. And the family loved that. Well, the interesting thing about it, they went around and told everybody at that service that look what Anderson McQueen did. Then when our aftercare team went out to the house a week or so later to meet with the family, guess what? They couldn't find the register book. They couldn't find some of the other things that we had given them, but they had that hubcap hanging on the wall. So that had created a memorable, emotional moment for that family. The flip side of that, though, is you can ruin the moment just as quickly as you build the moment. So you can do all those things great, but then what happens is the family comes in, say the week after the funeral, to pick up their death certificates, and they open them up. They get ready to go to the attorney's office, or worse, they get to the attorney's office, they open it up, and they found out you spelled dad's name wrong, or you put the social security wrong, or something that should have been caught very easily in the process, and it wasn't. And so now you've left them with a negative memory of your business. And so you want to leave the positive memory, not the negative, because if you leave the last memory they have is negative, then when it's time to use a funeral home again, now, well, let's see what the other alternatives are out there. Because remember, last time they messed up dad's death certificates and it delayed us getting the estate open, and it became a hassle and all of that. And so that's why we would preach to our staff all the time how all those little things matter so much, because you can easily lose that positive experience just like that if you make a negative memory at the end. So hopefully that helps answer that question for you.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that I got pizza yesterday, and I had to wait an hour, and the manager said, oh, we're going to give you the pizza, we're going to refund your money and give you a 6-pack of soda and deliver it.
Sure.
And you mentioned that sometimes the funeral director will overcommit what really the family wants.
Sure.
But at the end of the day, it's that gesture, it's the extra effort that does not leave a bad memory, but leaves that positive memory for that attitudinal loyalty.
Sure. And in fact, actually, research has shown that actually making a mistake is not a bad thing per se, but it's actually how we recover from the mistake that really makes the difference. And so that's why it's so important that in our industry that we start empowering our staff to be able to make those decisions when something does go wrong, be able to make the decisions to correct them at the ground level, because the sooner you can correct it, the faster you can correct it, the happier the customer will be, and actually it will help to make them a more attitudinal, loyal customer because they believe that you're going to make it right. If something goes wrong, Tyler's going to take care of me and it's going to be done right. And that carries a lot of weight going forward with a customer.
Well, John, thank you so much for joining me on the show. Your book was just so great to read. I've really enjoyed customer service, and when I was younger, I tried to be the cool kid, and then you get into service, and you really have to, and in another light, being a successful business owner, you've seen like I've worked for a successful business owner and kind of had the big boss approach, where although there was a lot of service, it was hard to get them to move, and so just having that extra, the service is just so important for a business, and I'm actually really passionate about service, and it's my company wouldn't exist without service, and especially when you're dealing with price, that's the other piece, is if whether you have a high price or a low price, the service always needs to be there. Some element of it, and I think your book was just, like I said, just a real pleasure to read.
Well, thank you very much, Tyler, and I'll leave your listeners with this, and that is that when it comes to customer service, it's not a one-time training meeting. It's a daily job. You have to be on it every day, and so remember, another little phrase we used all the time was that you get what you inspect, not what you expect. And so we train, unfortunately, what happens for many companies is they train their team on something new and then they expect it to happen and it doesn't work that way. You've got to come behind and inspect what's going on and make sure that you're meeting your standards every day so that you're always delivering those exceptional customer service experiences. And so I appreciate you having me on your show, and I hope it's been a great time for you. It's been a great time for me.
Well, I've learned a lot, and it was great talking with you, John.
Well, thank you, Tyler.
Funeral directors, thanks so much for watching. If you haven't purchased John McQueen's book, it's Lessons from the Dead. Go on Amazon and purchase it right now. Thanks so much for watching Success Leaves Clues. I'm Tyler Fraser. Until next time.